Seven Citizens, Black here, and today I wanted to list off the features or presentations that some might feel were missing with this year's CitizenCon 2955. Now, I saw some who might feel that something was missed because I've seen so many comments all around the web about people feeling a certain kind of way about any specific topic that they assumed we might get an update on. Now, I myself had one thing in particular that I assumed would be mentioned at CitizenCon, and it wasn't, which was the only real surprise for me. So let's get into this video and break down what could have been, but most certainly was not, but a little bit of context for the year first. So before I get into the list, let me first set expectations, and this might also help some of you understand why whatever feature that you were looking for was not mentioned. 2025 was a very different year for the game, and that goes pretty much for every aspect, whether you're talking about the release cadence, the topics that have been covered on Inside Star Citizen, and even the amount of episodes the content team from Star Citizen has put out. I know for some, no news was bad news, but yet we still seen more game patch releases than we ever have, even if that was not always for the best. We still had progress in the game. To me, this year has been a double-edged sword. In years past, we've heard players say that CitizenCon and even the weekly shows can overhype something or overpromise and underdeliver. So to see a year where barely anything was hyped up in CitizenCon and nothing was really promised, and yet we still had people unhappy, just pretty much shows that you cannot make everyone happy all of the time. Now, was I a fan of the way things were handled this year? Not entirely. I did not like the monthly cadence of patches. I wish ISC had broke more of the content that we did get before content creators did, just because there were times when, while it was cool to see players stumbling across new content and showing it, there were also instances where viewers might see something that was not yet completed and think that was all, or walk away from those content created videos thinking the info given was accurate, when it could sometimes be incomplete or cause misinformation to spread throughout the player base. And I'm just saying it would have been nice to hear from the devs on some of those monthly features directly before hearing it from content creators who were not an always reliable source. There is a part of me there that greatly respects how close CIG kept things to their chest this year. They showed remarkable restraint, and one might think that such a drastic change in messaging would equal up to less funds generated, which I'm sure had to have gone through their minds earlier in the year. Yet CIG has had a record-breaking year so far, and I expect it to end even higher than it's projected to go now. So with how this year went, and with all the messaging that we received leading up to CitizenCon by Jared and Benoit recently, and others on the community team as well, about how this year would be a very stripped down show with zero Squadron 42 news or updates, and only a 2-hour runtime, not to mention that during every single Star Citizen Live that came on this year, Jared reminded people that if they're not talking about a feature, it most likely is not being actively worked on, and therefore they are not ready to share it yet, and to see people still complain or be a little salty about the lack of info on many of those things and not take what was given as still something great is kind of shocking, but I should not be surprised by the internet anymore. Regardless, let's go ahead and see what features were quote unquote left out, and I will give a brief little explanation on why that most likely is the case using my knowledge of the roadmap and monthly reports. So some might say the title should have been what should have been, but I disagree. CIG showed off exactly enough and kept it related to what they feel like will be what we see over the next year. So I agree 100% with what they showed us, except for this very first item. So the upcoming ships tease has been something I myself and many others not only enjoyed seeing, but would reference throughout the year many times. It was a lot of fun to speculate on some of the weird ones that were hard to make out and provided many hours of awesome speculation. Now don't get me wrong, I was happy with the ships that were shown, even if I have my own idea of how the Grays Market ship should have been given to players in game through salvage reputation, but still, the ships were not the problem. The clear lack of teases and barely mentions outside of what we know are coming through the monthly report was a little disappointing and might even come back to bite them later on, because all of the content creators who constantly discussed those ships throughout the year, they helped hype some of them up, and also was just a great way to keep people clamoring for more and keep the ships alive in people's minds. This was a huge missed opportunity. So we knew we weren't getting an update as the teams put their heads down and get it done. Well, most of us knew that anyway. Seeing people not know this showed just how out of touch and out of the loop some players really are. Now, if you missed the many times that they said the past couple of months that there would be no squadron updates, then you really don't have a right to complain, because you're probably just casually following the game. But why let it bother you at all? But there was no update for these two systems. Now, my guess is that Castra might still be in early stages of white box and Terra is not even being thought of right now, or it's just so early in development that they just have nothing to talk about. We're getting an incomplete Nix system, and in what they showed off and stated was all we really needed to know. They spent the last year getting Genesis, the planet building tech, up to speed. It created a gorgeous planet, Nix 1, that they showed off and was one of the true highlights of this year's CitizenCon, and stated the other two planets will be introduced through the year, probably through storyline and events, which will still be cool. It will be interesting to see how mature Genesis is, which we will be clued in on how fast those other two planets come in, and also how fast they can revamp Stanton and Pyro with this same tech. All right, so we didn't hear anything about any new weather or further additions to the weather that they have added in 2025. Now, the closest they came to anything like this was to say the new asteroid belt in Nix would be much bigger than anything we'd seen before. I think they said something about maybe some gaseous clouds there. It would be nice to see more gaseous clouds, etc., in space that can do things to your ship's systems or the targeting, etc. Also, don't forget that we did not see the solar flares of Pyro come back into the game after being pulled last minute before 4.0 came out. I will also admit that while it was nice to hear Rich mention 1.0, a little bit of visuals on this or some mentions of specific features that came in 2025 to refresh people's memories might have gone a little further than just a kind of weird sit down with Jared, where Jared put on his best interesting face he could muster, which seemed kind of out of character for him somehow. So this is the one that I heard so many complain about, and I honestly did not expect to hear that base building or crafting was going to come out in 2026. I knew they've been working on it, but I also know that base building in particular has quite a few tech hurdles to overcome. So my wife and I, we discuss base building all the time, and each time we do, I usually come up with another tech hurdle that stands in the way, whether that be the Planet Tech 5 or Genesis as it's called now, not being implemented yet. There's also the issues with giving authority for our ships and hangars to the proper owner, which would prevent attacks at times or keeping people out, which as it stands now would be a huge problem for bases, because if they can't get it right for ships and hangars right now, then bases would be even harder. The fact is, there are any number of other tech hurdles they are not sharing and clearly not ready to discuss yet. We get some crafting, which will be nice, and I was very happy to hear it's coming to the tech preview channel soon. Next year, I would be surprised if we don't hear about base building coming imminently. We didn't hear about any new creatures such as those we have been waiting for, such as the space whales and more variants of those that we have. Now, many have been asking for the worms to be found in more of the normal caves that we currently have in game, and not just as an event, which I think is a legit ask. If they work, why not toss them in all over the place? Add those rare minables along with the Valakars as guardians, and let us have more ways to get things for Wicklow. There was some good news shared this past week outside of CitizenCon that they have hired a new creature person who looks like it's their main duty to work on creatures, so I would expect to see a lot more of those coming over the next year. Alright, so here's some random items. First up, social features were not mentioned at all, which was a bummer. I get the feeling that those are not really being worked on at all. I'm not sure what the holdup is, but we've really heard nothing about them. We also did not hear anything else about Starware. We saw some glimpses of new armor, but nothing new in particular, and we still have not heard anything about the quick change closet system that will allow us to quickly swap between clothes and builds. We did not get any new info about the AI and more improvements coming with that. We did not need an entire showcase for that, but it would have been cool to see if they are ready to show them off using rocket launchers, etc. to take out ships or driving around in ground vehicles, all of those things that they have worked on according to the monthly reports this past year. We also did not hear anything directly about the new mission system, which is coming with the Vulcan Tech preview patch that's been tested recently. We might get an ISC on this soon, but I've been curious why this new system is so great. I'm assuming it's what will allow the new intergalactic cargo trading missions that they did show off at CitizenCon. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the things that we did not receive an update on from last year's CitizenCon. Now, I would like to remind everyone that CIG does not always share what they are working on, despite there being a roadmap. If that was the case, then we would have known more about many of the features that were announced at this year's CitizenCon, which means many of those items that made this video could be actively being worked on. It's not as likely, but it's still a possibility. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you thought about this year's event. Were you let down, or did it hit pretty much how you thought it would? What were you most excited about? Also, come join me and my lovely wife every Thursday on Twitch and YouTube at 7 p.m. Eastern as we go over the week's news from Star Citizen. It's a nice, warm, and cozy little show to help those who were too busy with life to catch up on everything that happened throughout the week. Now, we'd love to have you. I've been Black, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you out there in the verse. Fly safe, everyone.